So let's talk about the Boston Celtics game and their big game, just absolutely close to perfection from Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Luke Cornett as well. Talk about him for sure. But overall, just their offensive scheme, I thought was really the gist of it. Their passing numbers were way up. Their potential assists went up like 14 from where they were before this that last game. Certainly, Derek White hitting a bunch of shots. Jaylen Brown picking up a big handling role there. But yeah, shot profile was so much better, especially in the second half. The Celtics went 11-12 at the basket, just 2-2 for the Knicks. Knicks couldn't get anything inside. So anything you saw, Austin, on how the Celtics responded with a really big win here?
Yeah, I'm actually pretty high on this Boston team without Tatum. Obviously, I do think Tatum is a positive. He contributes in a lot of areas, but he also, you know, I think the shot selection is better as a team when he's not on the floor, just because his game is so much of matchup hunt, kind of
Mm-hmm.
run the clock down, and then he himself takes so many isolated shots too. But just the ball movement when he's on the floor, not that he's not a willing passer, but he's not a quick swing point five kind of player. His passes are dribble, attack, draw two, and then maybe kick it. And without him on the floor, there's just so much more ball movement. They're running a lot more set plays, a lot more screening actions. The only screening actions when Tatum's on the floor is when he's the ball handler and they run, a ball screen to try and get him a switch is really what the Tatum plays look like. So I'm kind of buying that this ball movement is real. And then also worth noting is, the market is valuing Jason Tatum as like worth 6 points or more, which I know there's some other factors that aren't just Tatum in there, but
Mm-hmm.
after the market being too high in Boston all playoffs long, I think it's now too low because you're not really replacing Tatum with replacement level. I think Boston's kind of back end of the rotation is really strong. Obviously, I was shocked to see Torrey Craig get in there. That was not what I had on my bingo card, but he's being replaced by even with Porzingis out, which we'll talk about him in a sec. But you replaced him with more Horford and more Cornett and more Pritchard and more Hauser, which are all well above average replacement level NBA players, in my opinion. So I'm pretty high on this Boston team, and I think they're at least somewhat live.
Yeah, I think so too. And then the other thing that's been a pretty sticky trend is just making New York just really grind their way. They had just what was the stat here? It was like 7% of their possessions were in transition, and they've killed them when they are getting possessions more efficient. The Knicks are like like half court level of efficiency in their transition. It's been such a grind for them, really throughout this series, even in wins. But Dink, what have you been seeing from the Celtics? We could get into KP now, but
Yeah.
really specifically, anything player specifics that you saw. I'll be throw one more nugget. I thought the most interesting thing to me was the adjustment to put Drew Holiday on Cat. I talked a lot about how Al Horford was like giving up more shot volume to Cat in that matchup. I thought that was a really sharp adjustment to put Drew Holiday on Cat, which really took Cat out of his rhythm. We could talk about from a Celtics perspective, though. What else did you see?
Yeah. Obviously, I think Austin's correct in that they have a lot of above average talent to potentially replace Tatum. But if Kristaps Porzingis can't play very much and he's like below average value right now at this point, the margins do start to get thin in terms of like there's just not much rotation left. Once you get beyond Hauser, it's like a really big drop off in terms of the talent that they have available to them. So I'm interested to see, this game. They did have some foul trouble with Drew Holiday and Al Horford, and they navigated that pretty effectively. In this one, with despite Kristaps Porzingis playing just 12 minutes, big performances from Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, Jaylen Brown on the minute side of things. And they'll need that going forward as well. Obviously, the big story of Game 5 was Luke Cornett, who was just exceptional and has honestly under the radar been exceptional all season long. He's like top 10 in the league in plus minus. I've just been a really effective player all season long, and he was dominant out there in terms of defense. 7 block shots, 1 steal, plus 20 in his 26 minutes. Controlled the defensive boards really well as well. And so the question mark is, can you get that level of effectiveness from Luke Cornett? And if you can get kind of Luke Cornett in effect replacing Kristaps Porzingis from an effectiveness level, which he was in this game in terms of overall impact on the game, then Boston's really still quite a good team and quite strong. Obviously, going into Game 6 in New York will be really challenging. But you mentioned the adjustment that they made to kind of take Cat out of rhythm. They've had the New York offense outside of the second half of Game 4 really out of rhythm most of the series. So it's been a question of like, can Boston's offense kind of find its rhythm? It found its rhythm in a big way in game 3, and it found its rhythm in a big way in game 5. And so if they can find their rhythm offensively, and I thought they were like in and out of rhythm in game 4, it was mostly just Tatum playing really well, and the rest of the offense was kind of out of rhythm. If they can play well offensively, I think they've shown enough disruption to New York's offense that they can make things really hard on New York. And obviously they're going to build up a big 3-point shot attempts advantage in this game. They were also, both teams were making them at like 40% in this game, but the shots advantage from 3 for Boston really created a math problem for the Knicks on the whole. And that's ultimately, I think, what this series has largely come down to is the games that Boston's been really out of rhythm offensively. New York has been able to execute down the stretch and kind of take those games. And the games that Boston has been in rhythm offensively have created challenges for New York because they're going up, consistently against the set defense from Boston. And Boston has these like 3-point barrages that can be pretty deflating. So I thought it was just like more of what we saw kind of in game 3, which was just that ball movement, shooting, spacing all looked really good. It was also, if you want to look further at like players who were good in game 3 and game 5, you can look at Peyton Pritchard, who played a lot in game 3 and played a lot in game 5. I think his floor spacing and his ability to attack closeouts and be a secondary matchup hunter, I think is valuable for them. And so I think, they still have a combination of players that are very competitive. And I think Austin's right in that the market probably values Tatum a little bit aggressively on this front. But I'm still hoping and expecting to see New York play well in Game 6, and it'll be a real test for Boston to kind of get themselves up off the mat and get to a Game 7.
Yeah, and just Jaylen Brown, 18 potential assists, 12 made, a career high on the dimes. That was like just a game changer for them. And then Tatum was their like lead potential assist guy, but never 18. So that was really a big part of it. And then like you were saying, the catch and shoot edge was really big. And then a stat I looked up: Boston this year, if they make more than 23s, they're 22-1. Shots of the Pistons winning a game. But yeah, anything else? Anything you noticed on the Knicks side? Like Brunson had a bad game, fouled out early in the 4th. He had some really bad fouls. Cat had some really, really inexcusable fouls as well. Very sloppy game. OG was bad. They like all the Mikal was bad. Only guy that was good was Mitchell Robinson, who made all of his free throws. Yep. But and then Josh Hart, that like we talked about, Luke Cornett hiding on Josh Hart. That was pretty big. He was hitting him early, and that kind of got the Knicks going a little bit in the second quarter. But Austin, did you see anything from the Knicks? Like, how did they all just airball, and can they respond in a home Game 6?
I also thought Miles McBride was pretty good last game.
Yeah.
Not necessarily something that I expect to go forward, but I thought he held up well on when they hunted him just because of his size, and then he made 3 for 6 from 3. Yeah, I the thing I'll say though is that like kind of what we talked about in the series preview, the Knicks that are making their threes, it seems like, it's McBride and Josh Hart are the only ones that shot well from 3 last game. When the good shooters shoot well, it's going to be a series. But we talked about like beforehand, like the Celtics are really, really good at knowing your personnel and like forcing the players that they want to shoot threes to shoot threes. So it's like not really a coincidence that Josh Hart shoots 5 of 9 from 3 and Miles McBride shoots 3 of 6 from 3, and the rest of the team doesn't shoot well at all because like just from a quality of look, like Hart and McBride are way more open. McBride less so, but Hart and McBride are way more open from 3 than the players the Knicks would want to shoot from 3. So like, yeah, you would like OG to shoot better than 1 of 5. You'd like Mikal to get off more than 3-point attempts, but Boston's just doing such a good job at funneling those 3-point attempts to the Knicks players that they want shooting threes. So McBride and Hart will probably have better looks again next game. How does the Knicks kind of solve that? I'm not really sure. It's tough. Yeah, I think this Boston defense is really tough. Man, I wish I had better answers. Obviously, you look at the Cat 29 minutes last game and say, even with 4 fouls, like he has to play more. But yeah, I just don't see a lot of like screws that the Knicks can turn because they're already using their viable players.
I'm going to look it up later on matchups, but I'm curious how many of those Deuce McBride threes are like off offensive rebounds. I feel like it's like all of them. But yeah, and then anything you want to add on the Knicks, Dink, and then I want to talk more about Kristaps in depth there.
Yeah,
You could take the Knicks and we could talk more first steps.
a couple notes on the Knicks. I mean, there's not at this stage in the series. There's often not personnel adjustments that are to be made anymore. Once you get to like Game 6, Game 7, it's usually just kind of execution adjustments and an adjustment to having Drew on Cat. I mean, one of the challenges that Drew's really good at fronting, and then you have Horford kind of in help to provide kind of a backline of defense, or Cornet in these situations, and that provides kind of more of a struggle for Cat. What you can do there is you can, if he's comfortable with his shooting hand, which is a question mark, you can transition into some more pick and pop stuff. You get like open looks there for Cat. You can also kind of move his positioning on the floor, which is a little bit more cumbersome just because they're so used to using Cat sort of on the side of the floor to get into some of these side pick and rolls with Jalen Brunson, but you can get him kind of more in the middle of the floor and then initiate some potential high-low stuff with Cat, who's a pretty good passer there. So I think those are some adjustments that you could potentially see New York make offensively. But I think ultimately we know that if they're in a set half-court situation, it's going to be a grind against Boston's defense. The way that they need to be successful offensively is either Brunson, putting on the cape, which he did in Game 4 very effectively, or they need to force some more attempts via transition or continue to dominate the offensive boards. And that's where like Cornet really, sort of slowed down Mitchell Robinson's kind of domination of the offensive rebounding and started to like balance out the rebounding a little bit and change the tide because Mitchell Robinson's had no issue when Porzingis has been out there, no issue when Horford's been out there in terms of like just wreaking havoc on the offensive boards. In terms of forcing more transition, I'm interested to see if Tibbs opts. They've gone to so much switching in this series. Without Tatum out there, I'm interested to see if they maybe go to a little bit more kind of trapping or hedging or more aggressive stances on the ball handler, especially when the ball handler is Jaylen Brown. I mean, Jaylen Brown's biggest issues in the playoffs have been turnovers historically and his kind of loose handle. I thought OG Anunoby wasn't really attacking Jaylen very much in this game from a defensive standpoint, which I expected him to a little bit more. I thought Jaylen was sort of the aggressor throughout the game and played with a little bit more of like bringing the action to OG. So I think those are the ways, you could see the Knicks potentially like turn this around from what we saw in a Game 5 blowout. As you could see, kind of more aggressive defensive coverages thrown at Jaylen Brown to try to induce turnovers, try to get something into easy baskets, try to get the crowd going at MSG behind him. And I think that's ultimately like, if you're going to disrupt Boston and keep them out of rhythm, one of the ways to do it is get Jaylen Brown out of rhythm. He was very comfortable the whole game, kind of driving, kicking, finding opportunities for his teammates, and obviously it helps when Derek White's just knocking down everything. But I think just finding ways to make things less comfortable for Jaylen Brown. You don't want to be in rotation, especially if the Celtics are going to play more Pritchard out there, because there's just a lot of shooters on the floor to space. But I think you have to take some risks with Jaylen Brown's ball handling and force yourself into a rotation a little bit more. I think the same stagnant look over and over again is probably not the approach I take with Jaylen Brown as a primary ball handler.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing on the stagnant, similar look was the starters. That was one of the questions from, I'm pretty sure Fred Katz asked that. We saw in the third quarter, they were getting killed and no subs. That's been a problem. That starting lineup has been really bad. Minus 16.3 net rating. It's the worst in this round among any lineup with 20-plus minutes played. Has been really bad. And like he should have pulled the trigger quick on that one there. If anything you want to add there, Austin. And then I want to talk more about Kristaps. So if you have anything you want to add on like, how does he just run the starting lineup into the ground, and then we can get to Kristaps?
Well, I think part of the reason that I'm kind of high on Boston, they do have to win 2 games in a row, which would be tough. But just from a each game standpoint, the reason I think I'm a little bearish on what New York can do is like Drew said, like there's not many personnel adjustments you can make at this point. Like I agree that their starting 5 has been an issue, but it's just really like, do you go to McBride earlier? I don't really think so. Maybe go to Mitch earlier. But then you deal with more overlap or double big, and you don't want to like sub Cat out early. Like the answer, I don't think is less Cat. Like the obvious answer is just increase the 3-point volume. Like they're not going to win consistently when they're shooting half as many threes as Boston. But like we talked about earlier, like how do you get more threes? I think Brunson maybe off of like kind of a pick and roll. If they drop coverage, they go under the screen, or you can run a pick and pop with Cat. I think Porzingis is more of a drop guy than Horford is, but then you have Cornet. If there's Cornet minutes, maybe you can punish Cornet that way. And if he comes up, then you sort of have a mismatch and you can kind of go hunting. And if he doesn't come up, more Cat pick and pop threes. But man, outside of like intentional, two-man games, it's really hard to see the Knicks kind of get quality 3-point looks as much as they need to do it. So I wish I had more answers, but it's tough.
Yeah, and then Kristaps, what are we doing here? I mean, that he looked terrible. What minus 12 and whatever 12 minutes, whatever it was, has looked bad all series. He's the worst shooting player in the playoffs based on effective field goal percentage. Do you bench him? Do you just start him and like cross your fingers? You got like one good game left out of him. I don't know. Yeah, Dink, what do you do if you're Joe Mazzulla? Who do you start with the other four we know?
I mean, I think the question mark is how confident do they feel like Luke Cornett could play, into the 30s if necessary. And if they feel like he could, if necessary, then I think you start him and just see where it goes. The issue with, potentially starting Cornett is just if he gets into foul trouble early, then you're sort of like out one of the levers that you've been pulling kind of on the bench here. But I think Cornett earned it with the play that he had last game. I think Porzingis, obviously he couldn't even play in the second half. The comments were that he was having trouble breathing. Like, it just seems like he's pretty far from himself. And I think it's going to be very important for Boston to start out well. I think one of the things that Tatum provides that I think is helpful, there's many things obviously, but for Boston is when they are playing from behind, he is a player that plays with a little bit more poise than Jaylen Brown from like an offensive initiator standpoint. And so I think it's going to be very important in the first, 6 to 8 minutes of this, of game 6, ultimately, like, how does New York come out? How are they able to potentially try to leverage the crowd to their advantage? They have played from behind the whole series, like basically, and had to keep coming back in third and fourth quarters to win games. How would things change if they can play from ahead a little bit early in the game, put pressure on Jaylen Brown as a primary ball handler? That's what I'm thinking from New York's perspective. So if I was Boston, I'd be trying to just get my best lineup out there to start. And I think at this point, that's probably Cornett. Maybe it's Pritchard. I think it's definitely not Porzingis at this point, is the one. And if I was Boston, I'd also be saying, like, look, we've been hammering them in the first quarters and we've been getting off to good starts in these first 6-7 minutes of games, just generally. Like, let's not try to take the foot off the gas there. Let's try to get our best lineup out there to start and not let them kind of build the crowd. Like, try to slow the crowd as early as you can, because I think Game 6 is going to be raucous in New York, and I think it's going to be a meaningful home court advantage, one of the stronger ones that you'll see in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. And then to add to that, Jaylen Brown guarded Brunson. That was the other side of the adjustment there. So, yeah, Austin, where do you come down on this one? How would you start? And, like, how many minutes? That's our biggest question for this game. Like, how many minutes we put on his projection? So where are you at on this?
Man, I originally said 18 in the Slack, and sort of like as we're talking through, like, I'm coming down on this number. And I agree that I think they start Cornett. I'm not quite as worried about as Drew on sort of like how the rotation kind of works, because if you were forced to break glass, I think you would say the next most talented player to be inserted in the rotation, ignoring kind of roster fit, is Neemias Queta probably.
Yeah.
And so stacking bigs, especially against the Knicks, doesn't seem like so bad to start kind of Horford and Cornett. And then worth noting, like, Horford played over 20 minutes in the first half last game, and then just basically got nuked because of foul trouble. Yep. And sort of, if you he only played 24 over the whole game, and if he probably, I don't know if you want him playing 40 over a full game, but if you kind of disperse those 34 minutes over a more even game without foul trouble, then you're not looking at sort of having to go without Porzingis or play Cornett, sort of, what was that, like 19 of the first 22 second half minutes. Like, I think you start Cornett and sort of have Porzingis, just view Porzingis as like your backup big only. And also it's easier if Porzingis comes out and has trouble breathing or he looks off again. It doesn't really mess up your rotation if Porzingis is coming off the bench. You can either go Queta or back to your, the Horford Cornett minutes earlier. So I think they do start Cornett. I think obviously a fully healthy Porzingis is pretty valuable, but it's clear that he's not. And so I think you just kind of treat him as anything you get is gravy, and he's like a backup big only. And then, if he happens to look better, you could kind of extend the minutes off the bench and have him sort of have an extended run, into the second quarter and into the fourth quarter. I, again, like Boston here. I think we're talking from a betting perspective versus sort of who wins, and obviously Boston is not favored. You have sort of zigzag with really good home court in the Garden. I think it would be kind of, aggressive to say you expect Boston to win outright, if given even odds. But I do have this truly priced as a pick. I gave out Boston sort of in that plus 115, plus 120 range. I think that's definitely value. And sort of like, as sort of irresponsible as it is, I do think Boston is going to win Game 6 at a 50-50. So, I think you have to say the Knicks are more likely to win the series, given Boston has to kind of parlay winning Game 6 and 7. But in each individual game, I think I would have Boston favored. So that's where I am right now.
Yep. I'm kind of with you there. Dink, where you at on this one?
Maybe it's this is just a weird life turn, having grown up a Bulls fan, hating the New York Knicks, and now potentially referring to me picking the Knicks in Game 6 as a homer pick, living here in Manhattan and being able to go to the game. But I think it's going to be a different ball game for Boston playing at MSG. And I think if the Knicks can, I think the first 6 minutes of the game are going to be really, really important. I think if the Knicks can come out strong and get that crowd really going on their side, the crowd is going to be amped and ready to do it. It's just, can the Knicks starters actually play effectively for a 6-8 minute stint? I think I'm just interested to see how Boston looks when they don't have Tatum and things are going wrong. We didn't get a lot of that last night. We got a lot of, like, from the get-go, things were going right. Like, everybody was making shots. Jaylen Brown was kind of like creating comfortably. I'm interested to see, without Tatum, if things go wrong, what things look like for Boston, because I think it'll be a little bit more challenging for them. So I'm expecting to see a little bit more turbulence from the Boston offense in Game 6, and I think that'll be enough for the Knicks to win kind of a grinded-out environment.
Yeah, I kind of think Boston wins, but I'm like kind of where Austin is. I'm not betting it, though. I've just seen too many bad games from Jaylen Brown. Kristaps is 0. What if Jaylen Brown, or what if Drew Holiday gets into foul trouble? Horford gets into foul trouble. Kornet plays poorly. There's a lot that went right. So I don't know. I'm not picking anything, but I do kind of think Boston could kind of pull it out here. Let's go to the other game we don't have decided yet in the series here. OKC, what a win, man. Just, again, 2 games in a row now, their fourth quarter offense and defense stole the show. The Denver role players are probably the big story here. Fourth quarter, they go 1 of 15. Like, just can't happen when you're playing Joker the full second half again there. But, Austin, what have you been seeing from how OKC finally hit some big shots? They missed a lot of open shots. J-Dub was 1 of 15 on wide open threes before Game 5 there. But who on OKC? The Dort three-pointers, of course, was the big one there. But anything on OKC that you saw that kind of got them in the catbird seat here?
I think I want to start by saying, like, I was big on just OKC being a far better team than Denver heading into the series. And I have to say, like, I think the evidence has bared out that I was quite wrong on that stance. I know they're up 3-2, but, like, if you look at sort of, they had that mega blowout win in Game 2, but other than that, like, they've really struggled to beat Denver in a meaningful way. Like, I don't think that might be the only game that they've covered the entire series. And if we're looking at Game 5 here, like, OKC shot 41% from 3 and Denver shot 28% from 3. And that OKC, like, struggled to come out of that game at home. Like, I still think that the talent gap is pretty big in favor of OKC here. But if you're just evaluating based on what we've seen, like, I can't say that OKC has been sort of the right side here through 5 games. And going forward, like, I do still have a big talent gap, but I think you have to sort of shave your prior a little bit just based on what we've seen. As far as OKC, like, honestly, I'm not sure. And I think Dagnall is one of the sharpest coaches in the NBA, but I'm not sure he's found, like, some magic formula. It just seems like he's kind of riding with who looks good to him from an eye test perspective each game. Like, it's not like they figured out, oh, this is a matchup they need to go to, or, oh, we need to play this guy and stop playing this guy. Like, when Dort is hitting his threes, Dort plays a lot. When Dort's struggling, they go to Caruso and Casey Wallace, because Casey Wallace was good that game. I think OKC is just really deep, and he's sort of just putting the pieces on the floor that have been good that game. I guess the one thing that he's kind of figured out is, like, Jay Will has held up okay defensively. Hartenstein hasn't really handled Jokic. Not that I think anyone can handle Jokic. And like we've been through this so many times over the years. Like we found a Jokic stopper, whether it's Rui or Cat or whatever, and eventually like Jokic will figure it out. Like he just does. I think the best thing about Jay Will is that he's a new body that like you just like it's a different type of defender. You kind of have to like give him a few minutes on the floor to figure out how to score on that guy. So like the Jay Will minutes have been pretty good defensively. Do I expect it to continue? No, it's just a different look. Outside of that, the rotation is kind of what we thought it is. I guess there's been a little more Aaron Wiggins. They started playing him a little more in the first quarter and third quarter, whereas before he was just kind of like start the second quarter and play until it goes south, and then you're ready to bring Shea back, and that's been a bit different. But like not to discredit Dagnall, but he has so many options to choose from. There's like no wrong answers here. Everyone he's choosing from is a good player. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think it's going to continue that way. I don't think he's found quote unquote a permanent solution.
Yeah, they got a little lucky too. The corner threes, we talked about the PJ Washington last year and just destroyed them. Well, guess what? The last two games, Nuggets 3 of 15 in the corners, 0 of 15 in the corners. It's just crazy that they're missing those shots over and over again. But like you were saying with the Celtics, it's Christian Brown shooting them. It's Russell Westbrook shooting, mostly Russell Westbrook shooting them. So they're getting the right players to shoot those. It's not like it's Jamal Murray. Michael Porter Jr. has a couple in there as well. But they're also slowing them down, and they're taking away the paint really well. They did get a little bit more of that Denver did in the last game after kind of losing it overall. But OKC's defense is here to stay. But I think like you were saying there, like I didn't. Sounds like you didn't. Denver's defense is like way better than we thought, partly because of Gordon, Joker, Brown. Even Murray hasn't looked bad. Porter Jr. has not been good, but Westbrook's held us up there. But Dink, what have you been seeing anywhere from how Denver's been able to keep this so close?
Yeah, it's sort of a confusing box score to look at with Game 5 and say, okay, OKC had 10 more free throw attempts. They shot 41% from 3, and Denver shot 28% from 3. Denver turned the ball over 15 times. OKC turned it over 14 times, and you're like, okay, like how is this game close? And it's in a very, very weird, strange way. The Denver Nuggets took 46 threes. So even though they shot the ball terribly, they got a lot of volume up. They shot just 28% from 3. They ended up making one more 3-pointer than Oklahoma City, even though Oklahoma City shot 40% from 3. So it's weird to think that Denver is finding more 3-point volume with the way that OKC is playing, and maybe that's a feature, not a bug, in terms of the 3-point shooting struggles that Denver has had because of the shooters that are taking those shots. But I think that, coupled with Jokic looking more comfortable in the paint, in this one going 12 for 18 from 2, 5 for 7 from 3, hitting all 5 of his free throws on his way to 44 points on 25 shots, you start to like see a recipe of, okay, the defense is held up well enough. If Jokic is getting comfortable enough from 2, if they just can make an average amount of threes that are from these open corner spots, then Denver's really got something offensively, which I think, the concern coming in was like, how could they hold up defensively against OKC's athleticism? And they figured out ways with zone, with the individual defenders that they've used with Christian Brown and Jamal Murray, with bringing some late help to Shea and kind of disrupting rhythm for OKC. They've done a lot of these things that have been very, very helpful. And then offensively, it was like, okay, we feel like OKC will have a problem with Denver because of Jokic, but they held Jokic in check for the first 4 games, and then Jokic finally saw something in Game 5. So I think this game gets pushed to 7. I'm hopeful that we get to 7. I think it would be really fun. I think in general, this Denver team, like at some point, I think this schedule is going to playing 7 games in the opening round and not getting more than a day off in between. I think the schedule is eventually going to catch up with them. I think it's going to happen in this round in Game 7, but maybe if it doesn't, they'd still have just one day off before starting the Western Conference Finals. But I think Denver's really proven themselves, their core, 5-6 players, to be very, very effective. And you have to wonder if like Michael Porter Jr. was himself, how things would look like for Denver this postseason, because he's really been a shell of himself, not only in terms of like offensive aggressiveness, defense. He's clearly limited in terms of the physicality that he can kind of take on with that shoulder. And then the shooting stuff has been just dreadful on the whole. He's not getting shots at the rim as he did with offensive rebounds and different things. Different ways that he helped create extra possessions for them in the regular season are just like out the window now because of, having to protect from contact from that shoulder injury. So I think Denver's really proven themselves to be still in championship pedigree. I think OKC is finding their way through with a very deep and talented roster, that they have different, they have different options that they can call on. I think they ultimately close this out, but I think they do it in 7. I think Denver takes care of home court in Game 6.
Mm-hmm. And just one more macro note, the transition scoring. Denver was first in fast break points. They've cut down their transition frequency in the last 4 games in half, 17.9 to 19.7. I'm sorry, 9.7, excuse me, there. And they also aren't scoring in transition, 0.9 per possession. It's just been crazy that they've been able to limit them so much. But yeah, anything else you wanted to know, Austin, on this? But there's kind of a lot we could still talk about. But yeah, anybody specifically, road Dort, I think that's always an issue. He shoots 10% worse on 3-pointers on the road. I think that's going to really help. But yeah, how do you see kind of, any role player you maybe want to talk about that could impact this game?
Yeah, I wanted to give some thoughts on Denver. Nothing like too groundbreaking, I would say, but I if you ask me who wins the game, I think I would say OKC, but I kind of like more agree directionally with Drew that like Denver has a lot of. If you are a Denver fan, there's a lot of room for optimism here. Kind of what you said, like the opposite of OKC is Denver role players get to shoot at home now, and like a lot of their players shoot much better at home, including Michael Porter Jr. and Christian Brown. You'd expect Porter Jr. to be better again. And then one thing I want to talk about is like Jokic, for the first time maybe ever, we have seen him kind of like he's always been, if you double me, I'm going to get the ball out. And this is the first time I can ever remember him kind of like attacking double and triple teams in a way that I've never seen before. He's kind of like, he can just shoot over the top. He can go early. They're not as good looks for him, but he made them 17 for 25. It's just kind of amazing that he could do this and he just never has. And you kind of look at like how the series has gone. He's averaging almost 15 potential assists per game in this series, but only 5 actual assists because Denver is not making anything. And this is the first time we've seen Jokic kind of like, okay, you're not making the shots. We need to win this game. I'm just going to start being more aggressive and shooting. I don't know if that's an Adelman thing or if that's sort of like a Jokic desperation thing, but like this is a new version of Jokic that we haven't seen. And sort of if, I don't know how much more, OKC can't send a 4th bot. Like they've already sending maximum help. And sort of if Denver does kind of hit their open threes at home, there's a lot of room for optimism here with Brown and Porter. And then one last note I wanted to mention, every year we talk about Denver, like Denver has a really good postseason defensively and they make a deep run and then they lose a key piece. And then we're like, and then like whether it was Bruce Brown and then it was KCP, and then they come out the start of the next half of the regular season and they look like a poor defensive team. And we're like, all right, well, this is the end of Denver's, good defense. They don't have many good individual defenders. They lost a key piece and they're not the same defense. And this year it's sort of, you can argue Russell Westbrook or who has actually been good, in the postseason. Yeah. And every year it comes around to the postseason and their defense steps up in a major way. And this is like 4 years straight of just rinse and repeat. And especially Jokic, Jamal, and Aaron Gordon all get this huge playoff boost in the postseason. Mm-hmm. And like it's just that meme where you like lean forward in your chair. Like the Denver just tries harder defensively every postseason. I think we just have to agree that like, this is when Denver tries, they're always capable of this. Jokic is always capable of defending like this. So I'm kind of buying this Denver defense.
Yep, for sure. And then just with Westbrook, I looked at 63% of his shots in the series have been wide open, which is freaking crazy. They're just leaving that dude. And he's only 25, and he's missing 25 effective field goal percentage there. Yeah, anything you want to add role player wise, Dink? Otherwise, you kind of made your pick already. But... Yeah,
no, I was just gonna say to Austin saying we haven't seen Jokic like this aggressive against doubles and triples. The one series that kind of came to mind, but I don't think Kerr was sending as much help. But the 2021-2022 first round series against Golden State, where Jokic just had, it was like
Draymond,
Campazzo and Austin Rivers and like Monty Morris were his backcourt options because Jamal was out and had gotten hurt towards the end of that season. Jokic in that series was just super, super aggressive. And like that rung a bell to me of like, oh, I just remember this one time where like he was just like overly aggressive in a way that we haven't seen him play before. And I think some of that is the case here where it's like, I don't have the same level of confidence in our surrounding pieces being able to elevate this offense. So I'm going to need to try to do some of this stuff myself. And obviously he's very capable of doing that. But yeah, I expect Denver's role players to play a little bit better. It was interesting that we saw a little bit Julian Strother. I know that was a prediction Austin had made kind of earlier in the preview of this series that we might get to that point later on in the series. I think ultimately, like, we haven't dealt with much foul trouble from Jamal Murray or Christian Brown that's thrust them into like asking for more guard minutes from these guys. But Strother is another shooter that they could potentially get out there, and he's like, they haven't been able to attack him defensively as much as I thought they would. OKC, he hasn't been out there very much, but it's just like it is the one option that Denver has kind of at their disposal. They have been getting good shooting from Peyton Watson though in the series, surprisingly. Like, Watson shot the ball decently well. So I think Denver plays well at home. I think the Denver crowd shows up, and maybe I'm biased, but hoping for a game 7 in that series, because I think it's been just an awesome the series of round 2 for sure.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple injury notes. Michael Porter Jr. said after the game, we played well enough to win the last 2 games. A lot of the reason we lost is because I'm not helping to contribute. He said I haven't been helping in any way. And then also J-Dub is hurt. J-Dub had the big shot late, but he said his wrist is still bothering him. Perhaps that's why he's shooting so poorly there. So yeah, Austin, you kind of made your pick, but if you kind of want to like lay it out there pretty clean, sounds like you're on the same page as Dink.
No, I mean, I'm choosing OKC, but because they're the better team and they're favored, and like,
yeah, okay,
I don't feel good about it. I think kind of like if you asked the majority of the NBA fandom, like, people are choosing OKC here. The market's choosing OKC here, and that's why I'm choosing OKC. But I think like sort of like the sharp way is like more rooms for optimism for Denver than sort of what consensus is. But I mean, I have to pick OKC.
We'll also note that like the market over the course of the series has kind of, as you allude to, Austin, where the market's sort of said, okay, like, they're not 5.5 to 7.5 point favorites in Denver, OKC. Now we're down to 4.5, right? Like, the market has sort of said like, okay, Denver has proven they're worth enough in this, that the spreads have tightened a little bit as the series has gone on. So I think there is, while OKC remains a favorite and deservingly so, I think there has been an acknowledgement from the market that Denver is, perhaps a little bit stouter than originally anticipated.
Yeah, to that point, Austin mentioned that OKC covered that one game that was a blowout. Other than that, Denver's had it every other time. And the spreads in that series, it's been the home's been the same, 10.5, 10-10 in the OKC games, and then it was 6.5, 6 in the other 2 Denver games. So a little bit of market respect on the one coming here. I don't know. I think OKC's winning tonight. I think OKC's covering tonight. I just think they've got a lot of answers. I think SGA getting more usage in the last game. I think he's going to have a big usage game. I think I like what I saw from him in the fourth quarter. I think J-Dub can get into a better rhythm. I think Caruso's going to have a big series. I just think that I don't know. Like, MPJ's getting worn down. We've seen Jamal Murray's efficiency drop in every game in the last 4. There's just a lot working for him. So I haven't bet it yet, but I think OKC kind of comes out and delivers a big game. So I'm on an OKC island there.
For the 6th consecutive game, Mike is on it.
Yeah, what shocker. Actually, I haven't been betting it too much. But I
good. Thankfully for you, because they have not been covering.
Yeah. Today
I had a question for you guys. Do you think Caruso playing 24 minutes is like they want to limit the amount of like long stretches he has, or do you think they just don't view him as like deserving of 30 minutes? Because like, to me, like, OKC is up 3-2, but they've quote unquote been struggling. Like, Caruso is an incredibly good player to me. Like, I would be playing him 28 to 32 if he were capable of it. Like, why is he not playing more in your guys' opinion?
I think the thing that they're struggling with is ultimately, like, they figured out that they do not have comfort with Chet being the lone big out there defending Jokic. And as a result, they need one of Hartenstein or Jay Will out there at all times that Jokic is out there. And as Jokic's minutes keep spiking up during the playoffs. So if you have SGA and you have J-Dub out there as much as you possibly can, and then you have one of these bigs of Hartenstein and Jay Will out there, and then you have Chet out there for like as much as you can, you're down to like this one spot. And so I think it's kind of become this like one spot between Dort and Caruso ultimately, and like Kaysen, kind of showed out in game what was that, game 4? Game 4. But I think ultimately that they've just like run a little bit where it's just like they're just one share short of like trying to figure out how, like, I think if they didn't need Hartenstein or Jay Will on the floor at all times because they felt good enough with Chet handling Jokic one-on-one, I think you'd see a lot more Caruso. I think that's the thing that's like limiting Caruso's minutes down a little bit. But I wouldn't be surprised if you told me at the end of this game, at the end of game 6, like Caruso had a 28-29 next to his name on the minute side. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I I think just like cut out Joe entirely. Get rid of that. Like, don't even use him. Those minutes could go to someone else. Don't play Aaron Wiggins anymore. Like, great story, cool. He's super fun. Like, cut that down. So I'm with you. I think they just tighten it up and get Caruso out there for like 26, 27. I think it's like by design though. Like, they just don't want to play him a lot because he goes out there and just gives it all for so long. So probably not playing 30. But yeah, is that kind of how you would play it, Austin? Where you just like trim the borders and kind of just like make it more condensed?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think Wiggins and Joe are kind of the ones I would say too. And then if forced to choose between Dort and Caruso, I know Dort was hitting his threes last game, and I think Dort is a really good player. But I would probably go more like if it's not a durability thing, like I would play Caruso more minutes than Dort. If I were the coach, I think Caruso is a better player. And like the main argument for Dort is sort of like he's a big body and can kind of hold up on these like guards with strength, but like it's Jamal. He's mostly shooting jump shots, and you're replacing him not with Isaiah Joe. You're replacing him with another really good defender, Caruso, who also helps more on the help defense thing. Like there's just not a lot that I think Dort does that Caruso doesn't. Whereas I think there are plenty of things like ball handling, playmaking, off ball defense that Caruso does that Dort doesn't. So I don't know. It's not a Dort thing. It's more just let's find ways to get Caruso into the upper 20s because I think he's extremely good.
Yeah, just cut the rotation down, I think. Nothing against Dort or anything like that, so I'm with you there. But we'll be tighter leash on Dort after I had the stat and matchups, how bad he's been on the road in the playoffs. Talked about the regular season. I think he's like 1 of 11 or something. It's something really bad. Where is it? Shoot, I can't find it. 2 of 22. 2 of 22 on the road in the playoffs. So yeah, 9%. Cool. Yeah, so that covers that one. All right, let's talk about the Wolves. Really impressive, man. Like they were almost going to blow this game, and they get right back on track here. I'll go with Dink first. What was the most impressive of just almost sweeping basically the Steph-less Warriors?
I mean, I think the thing that remains the most impressive to me through the first few series of the playoffs has been Julius Randle's performance in the playoffs. I did not ever envision in Julius Randle's career that he would be a significantly positive contributor in the playoffs. Like that's just not the archetype that I had pegged for his style of play and the way that he played. And then if you talk about that while he's being one-on-one defended by Draymond Green most of the series, I've been like, yeah, that's not an edge for the Wolves. And that was a huge win for the Wolves. Julius was super efficient throughout the course of the series, not only creating for himself, but creating for others against Draymond Green. I think the big thing that stood out to me about the Wolves, and whether it's the carryover that Steph, his presence has offensively in terms of how it makes defenses work, both from a mental and a physical perspective, and how that carries over to maybe less efficient offense. Also, obviously, like taking the ball out of the basket as opposed to getting misses and going. But the story for me of the last 3 games of the series where, or the last 4 games of the series where Steph was fully out is just like, why couldn't Golden State's defense like really make things hard for Minnesota? It didn't look hard for Minnesota. It looked very hard in the first game while Steph was healthy for Minnesota, and then it didn't look hard after that for their offense. And so I think that's the thing that was most surprising to me, seeing Minnesota put up 121 points to close this one off. If you had told me coming in that Golden State would have finished at 110, I would have been like, oh, we might have a game 6 in this one. But Minnesota's offense was the thing that was most impressive to me. Mike Conley was exceptional in the last 3 games of the series, with his minutes getting elevated and doing all the Mike Conley things, like all the little things in terms of organizing, knocking down open shots. Anthony Edwards' decision-making was really good. Largely, I know he had 7 turnovers in this one. But in general, I thought his playmaking and decision-making for both him and Randle were quite effective. And that's the story for me, is like the Wolves, we know the Wolves can really defend. The story for me was like this offense was multifaceted and had, 2 hubs that were giving the Warriors, a team that's a very, very good defensive team, a lot of problems. And Julius Randle was just exceptional throughout the series.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of – Randle was the headline, but I thought just the balance from like almost everyone, like Dante had some bad games, Nas had some bad games, but like in general, like most of the games from everyone in the rotation besides Nahu was in a big part. I thought like it went really well overall, but Randle was absurd. I thought Rudy Gobert, well, obviously the closeout Rudy Gobert. I was calling him Mariano Gobert in our Slack, but yeah, anybody specifically besides Julius Randle, Austin, that maybe impressed you most for this just like I said, they basically swept the non-Steph Warriors.
No, I mean, I would echo Drew's opening statement word for word. I am a known Julius Randle hater. I think he does so many negative things, and none of those outside of the turnovers really bared their head whatsoever in this series. He was really efficient. He was pretty good at passing out of doubles. He was efficient. He just did everything at sort of like the flashes of Julius Randle that you see for a few minutes a game when he's engaged. He was that version for the entire series. And like I can't believe it. I can't believe what my eyes saw, but like it happened for 5 games. He averaged 25 points and 7.5 assists on 53 from the field. Like if he's playing like this, like Minnesota's just unbeatable because their role players are probably the best role players, maybe OKC, but like the second best collection of role players in the NBA. And like you said, like outside of Randall, like I'm looking through these series stats, like no one else looks crazy, sort of like that's out of the realm of things you would expect them to do, right? Like like they forced a lot of steals. I guess like the Timberwolves as a team forced a ton of turnovers. But part of that was just Golden State giving the ball away. Like they were forced to use ball handlers that weren't used to that role. But outside of that, and outside of Julius Randle, like what about this series or what about individual player performances looks out of the ordinary for the Wolves? Like I can't say anyone else looks like, oh, they'll never do that again. And so like I think Minnesota is very real. On Golden State side, I'm usually one of these people that believes the market overrates any individual player's absence. But I think where we see this kind of fall apart is these teams that are constructed around certain players that don't have good backfills. And so like it isn't just Steph Curry as Steph Curry. It's that the rest of the Golden State Warriors players like are low usage players that are not capable of upscaling their usage outside of Kuminga and Jimmy Butler and like maybe Buddy Hield, but even then he's more of an off-ball player. Like you're forced into. I think one of the pods that I wasn't on, Drew made this point. Like you're playing so many players like P. Santos and Brendan Pajemski and Draymond Green, Trace Jackson Davis, Kevon Looney, like so many players that don't have a lot of ball skills or like a lot of like creating advantages for other people. They're the ones that are benefiting off the creating advantages. Like Golden State had such a tough time to generate sort of bend the Minnesota defense in any meaningful way all series. Like, kind of what we said in the preseason, like Jimmy Butler has some bad matchups, but they're going to let him go to work. And like Jimmy Butler on the positions where he took shots wasn't that bad, but like he's not really creating. He didn't have that many assists. He's not creating that many possessions. Minnesota's just letting Golden State sort of have these bad looks, and Golden State's incapable of sort of creating good looks. Whereas like they had to help so much on Randall and Ant that like Minnesota was generating so many wide open looks. Like if you replay games 2 through 5 100 times, like I just don't think that there's going to be that many different outcomes here. From an eye test standpoint, like it just looked like 2 different offenses versus 2 different defenses. It didn't look like a fair battle at all. Like maybe I'm being too unfair, but like am I wrong here on any of this?
I think the only thing that was maybe like a bit of an aberration was like Jay McDaniels 0 foul trouble the whole series. Like against like a team that's drawn a lot of fouls. That's probably the only one. But like what? Only one bet. I think he only had one game in. It was game 5, right? Everything. I think all the Lakers games, he was the only ones he's been out of foul trouble, and all of them like that.
Nobody loves playoff officiating more than Jade McDaniels. Yes, nobody loves playoff officiating more.
It did help. I noted this on a couple. They had a couple light foul callers in these games. I think that kind of helped them. But yeah, getting 9 out of 10 no Jaden foul trouble games is like truly remarkable. But and like, god damn, he's so good. Just the versatility to go from like guarding Luka to guarding Steph for a little bit to guarding Jimmy Butler. Like, oh god, he's just so good. I love him, my guy. Anything you want to mention? Can they beat OKC? Like that's the big question. I think they could beat Denver. We've seen that. But can they beat OKC? That's kind of the big question, Dink.
I mean, I'm at the point where after these playoffs, I've had enough strong takes that teams cannot possibly be beaten, or I don't see a path, and those teams have gotten absolutely rolled over. So I'm of the belief that I've been humbled by the NBA, and anybody can beat anybody at this time, except the Heat and the Cavs, apparently. But yeah, Minnesota, I think I think they present some challenges to OKC just with the physicality and the one-on-one individual defenders that they have kind of at their disposal. We'll see if we're able to fully preview this series before a game is played or not, because I think game one would be on Sunday if OKC is able to close things out tonight. But ultimately, I think they've got a star player in Anthony Edwards who's fairly like unaffected by high end kind of defenders around him. They are if they have Julius Randle playing this well, I think they can beat anybody. If they have Julius Randle playing like the way that Austin and I have thought of Julius Randle, which is much worse, I think it'll be difficult, because I think they'll have a hard time keeping the game in a grind phase, which I think Minnesota can play with OKC if it's kind of in a grind phase. I think if it gets into like transition, I think OKC that's more likely OKC getting themselves into transition than Minnesota getting into transition against OKC, just with the way those two teams are at creating turnovers and different things like that. So, but Minnesota is very impressive and very deep, and they have a lot of ways, especially with the number of threes that they generate as well, to like have games where their offense can carry them even in against tough matchups. So it'll be fun to see Anthony Edwards get a second crack at the conference finals.
Yeah, I think that's the key. Take care of the ball. If Minnesota takes care of the ball and they shoot okay, like they're definitely live. And we saw the formula from the Nuggets that put a little pressure with Christian Braun, in this case with a way better player, and Jay McDaniels, and you've got just way more length to gap help instead of the Nuggets, who are still pretty big, but just not as big as the Wolves are. So yeah, they're definitely live. I'm curious to see where the line comes out. Where do you think the line comes in on this Austin? We don't need to talk through Denver stuff, but what's the line? Would you have interest on either side?
I could be way off here. I'm guessing OKC with home court is probably going to be in the minus 200s, like the low 200s kind of.
220 is the first number that came to my mind. Minus 220.
220, same thing. So.
And I think I have enough Minnesota to make out of the West futures. I probably wouldn't add more, but I think if I didn't have that, I would probably dabble on the Wolves. I think there's no team that matches up perfectly with OKC, but I think Minnesota is about as good as you can do with the individual defenders and the 3-point shooting and the size all wrapped into one. They can run a ton of like 5-out lineups here with sort of like Conley and Dante and Ant and Jaden and Nas or Randall. That's 6 shooters right there. And they, like you said, they have the defenders to match up with like OKC's many options. The 2 paths I see for OKC here, and obviously they will be the favorite, so I hate to use the word paths, but the 2 advantages that OKC has is, like you said, Minnesota can be really turnover prone, and if they hunt Conley and take him off the floor, like Ant and Randall could really turn over the ball against heavy pressure like OKC. And I don't really trust their decision making on like OKC's really good rotational defense. Like Golden State was just heavy help, but like OKC is heavy help, but then they were really good on the backside rotations, like kind of like leave the wing, but then you make the pass to the cross court wing, and then the corner slides up and steals the ball. Like you see that so many times. And then the other thing too is like Minnesota's so good at forcing bad shots, but those bad shots, OKC probably has the best shot takers for those like kind of like trail defender pull up long 2. Like you have SGA and J-Dub, which they kind of like that shot anyways. So like the shots that Minnesota funnels are like exactly the shots that OKC wants. I think that's why OKC should and will be favored. But like I said, like can you construct a better team? Can you choose a better team to match up with OKC specifically than Minnesota? I'm not sure you can.
Yep, I'm with you there. Maybe it goes to like minus 190 if it needs to go to game 7 there with the short rest there. So, and then let's talk Indiana. I mean, my God, just another impressive win. Them and the Wolves. They only needed 5 games for these series to advance in impressive fashion. And like we were talking about with the Wolves, like who had a bad series on the Pacers? Like Siakam a little bit. Turner was incredible. Halliburton was quiet, but he did enough. Nembhard was insane. This team's insanely deep. They're like, to me, they're like very similar to the Wolves, but like more of like the offensive punch. But Dink, where you like, are they going to be favored? Like, how do you see this kind of shaking out, and can they get to the finals?
I am very interested. Obviously, like my brain is struggling to price Indy because I've been getting them wrong for 2 years straight now. But I'm very interested to see where pricing comes out on a series, especially against New York. I would be very interested to see if Indy is actually favored in that spot. I don't think that they would be, but I think their play in the playoffs, and I think the way that they match up with New York specifically, I think is really, really strong. So I will be interested to see if New York can close this out, what a series line looks like there. But yeah, I mean, I don't have anything more to say about Indy other than they consistently over the last 2 years in the playoffs have had kind of all the ingredients that you'd want for a team. If you were rooting for this team, you have Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard kind of elevating their games in the playoffs. You have Tyrese Halliburton kind of taking care of big minutes and big possessions, key clutch shots. You've got Rick Carlisle making like really sharp adjustments, either like rotation and personnel standpoint or scheme wise, to kind of like get good looks. You've got Miles Turner playing his best basketball of his career at this point, and it feels like you have everything that you'd want if you were a fan of this team. Like they keep surprising to the upside in a way that I concede I was wrong on them. I had them graded poorly in terms of the way that I evaluated them, and I thought it was just another spot where, like, I'm talking here about how Game 6, if the Knicks could, really put pressure and play from ahead, all things that Cleveland was able to do in Game 5, and Indiana said, nope, we're still here. We're still going to fight. We're still going to grind. We're going to find our way. We're going to find our rhythm back through this offensively. We're going to put you in jail, and we're going to put you in hell by pressing and different things like that. And so I just super impressed by Indiana.
The ball pressure, the full court press for a team with no transition, like they're going to have such a pace edge. So we'll talk more about it for sure. But Austin, anything you want to kind of fire up before we dig more in on it Monday?
Yeah, I'm actually glad we've had some disagreements on this pod, because I feel like we're usually lockstep. I would agree wholeheartedly with Drew's sentiment that I've been low on them and missed wrong on them for 2 straight years as well. I think where we disagree is that I'm standing firm still. The 2 pieces of credit I would give to Indiana, one I mentioned in a previous series preview pod, is that their defense has finally showed a willingness to go away from their strict their defense has been better because they've been a little more flexible in how they do it, and I think that's real. And then the other point worth noting is, my friend pointed this out, but if you sort by best 3 and 4 man combinations throughout the regular season, a lot of Indiana lineups are sort of in the top there. Like their starting unit plays really well, and they're able to if they do need to sort of like consolidate, like I do think that 4-man lineup of any combination of their starters has been really good for a year now. With that being said, like I would still have either Boston or New York pretty heavily favored over Indiana, and sort of noting that, like, man, I keep being wrong on them, but I'm not willing to move my prior on Indiana. I don't believe that I think there's too many holes here. And like if you looked at their sort of series versus the Cavs, I do think Nembhard and Mathurin are the 2 that stand out. As like Nembhard shot 52% from the field and 50% from 3 on mostly like not that good of looks. Like, would those jumpers continue to fall? Mathurin shot 51% from the field. Like they shot like they have to have shot over 50% as a team against the Cavs. That seems fairly unsustainable versus the Celtics or the Knicks. And then the second piece also is like they faced 2 teams consecutively that were very susceptible to transition, right? Milwaukee, and then Cleveland loves to play fast. And like obviously Cleveland loves to get in transition too, but they also give up like whether it's the Knicks or the Celtics, both teams that are the really slow paced and sort of deny transition. Like Indiana runs a lot of off looks throughout the game on transition, easy buckets, sort of like these trail threes and these sort of like what I would call easier buckets that if you just have a team that's really slow paced for 48 minutes, like I think Indiana could struggle to get a lot of these easy looks that they've been getting over the regular season in the last 2 series. So I'm ready to be wrong again. I'm ready to be hurt again, but I would have Indiana as a pretty decent underdog versus either team here, even with the rest considerations.
I'll say that, I picked Cavs in 5. We were like, take value on the Bucks side in the first round. But like, hey, the market's wrong too.
Took the Knicks against the Pacers last year.
Yeah.
I mean, we have been down it with Indiana.
Yeah. But what I'm gonna say was like the whole market is like the Pacers have covered 7 out of 10 I just looked this up. In the playoffs against the spread, they beat the spread by 7.9 points per game. That's the best by far. Next closest is Minnesota plus 4.4. Like the whole market's on this. So I don't know. I'm curious to see if there's market correction. I'm like in the middle. Like I kind of think I want to pick against them, but I think they do have a lot of good answers for what the Knicks could do. I think I'd pick Boston, honestly.
I like them. I like their match. I'd like them matched up with the Knicks more than I do Boston, even without Jason Tatum. I think Boston has kind of more relentless rim pressure with Jaylen Brown than New York does, and I think look, Jaylen when he was healthy last year against the Pacers gave Nembhard and Nesmith all they could handle. So like I don't want to say that Jaylen, but those are two relatively well suited defenders. I guess my question for you, Austin, how many games of Andrew Nembhard in the playoffs before we're buying? Because we're at 27 games of a 640 true shooting percentage for Andrew Nembhard compared to 200 games of a 540 true shooting percentage in the regular season. So how many more Andrew Nembhard playoff games of him playing like this before you start to believe in playoff Andrew?
Infinite, like it's not like it's not like he throws 6 inches and like it's not like he's like getting to the basket like LeBron. He's taking the exact same shots. They're just going in. Like unless you can argue he's like intentionally missing shots in the regular season. He's a really good jumper. I don't know what to say.
Always, his brother's doing like combine stuff, Ryan Nembhard, and I'm like, dude, this guy's gonna get drafted. He's like a Cody Williams, man. Like he may not even be good, and he's gonna get drafted because this is his brother.
Especially since you don't even have to be good, because we know that like Nembhard in the regular season has been totally fine, but it's the Nembhard in the playoffs, and so nobody will know if his younger brother ascends in the playoffs in the way that Andrew Nembhard does. But yeah, I also think the thing that I like about Indiana as well is the versatility that they've played with kind of offensively during the course of the playoffs. They can be a team. They just move the ball so well. They just pass the ball so much more frequently than other teams and move the ball around and just kind of wear you down. And I honestly think like there's something to that in terms of just like breaking team souls defensively, where at some point, like everything in the postseason is so hard. It's just so difficult in the postseason, and the energy expended. Like you've seen former players interviewed about this, and they will say like one postseason game is the equivalent of like 2 regular season games in terms of how your body feels after it. And so I think if you're trying to guard Indiana, who's passing the ball like 10 to 15 times per possession before getting a shot up, and then at the end of the possession they're actually making shots, it is just so defeating over and over. And because they're just constantly moving the ball and constantly moving around, I think it just kind of breaks teams emotionally. I think the Warriors had some of this. Obviously, like Steph is like a different animal than Halliburton or Nembhard or anything that Indiana has. But I think there's some component to that of like there's no time to catch your breath against Indiana, whereas other teams, they slow it down. They get into these like sets that are like repetitive over and over. And so guys are just kind of going through the motions of like, okay, like I know what's coming next. With Indiana, you're just constantly like chasing a rabbit around.
Yeah. Just the assisted buckets are so high and just making so many jumpers there. But all right. Anything else you want to mention, Austin, before we wrap up?
Nope.
Cool. Me too. Think you could promo us up and get us out.
Yeah. So for those of you who are fans of basketball, if you're fans of the W season starts on Friday, and Established Run is going to have WNBA DFS coverage this season. The same projections team that's been working on the NBA side will be working on the DFS side for WNBA. And then we'll also sell a full stat projections detail. There will be no official picks package this year with the WNBA. Partially, people have asked why. Partially, it's just because liquidity in those markets is so fragile. We don't think an official picks release package would go particularly well. And so we think it would be better just to have people kind of hunting on their own bets with the full stat projections that we're going to put out. But we've announced the details of those products on our subscribe page, establishedrun.com/subscribe. WNBA, you can find more details over there for any of your WNBA needs. The product is niche and a little bit more expensive because it is niche, but we're very excited to be covering it and really excited about continuing the basketball conversation with the women through the summer.
Yeah, it should be pretty fun. I was talking to Sam on the hike today, and I was, I was like, hey, that Carmelia Cardosa that you went to South Carolina? Like, I even know women's college basketball stuff. So, yeah, excited for this for sure. And we're still going to grind in the NBA. So appreciate you guys listening. Catch you guys next time.